All right, dear students, welcome to the orientation of the ACCA paper Audit and Assurance. And this is one of the important paper of the skills level exams. Why I say this is important, because this is important to pass, first of all. And the second thing is that because you are an accountant and probably after completing your qualification or even during the qualification, when you're joining the audit firms or accountancy firms, or you're going for some accountancy jobs. So basically your interview or the test, whatever, constitutes the questions which will be coming from two papers, two main ACC exams. One paper is the financial reporting, that the major questions will be from the standards that they'll ask you regarding IS 16, IS 20, and things like that. The accounting, bank reconciliation, accruals, and prepayments. And particularly talking about the accountancy firms and if similarly internal audit jobs and other related jobs, they ask you the questions from this paper, Audit and Assurance. And even if you ignore the tests and these interviews, your profession is mainly all about this financial reporting and the auditing skills. So not only you need to have the knowledge to pass this exam, but also to have a good career. So this paper is very, very important. Another important thing to know is that if you do this paper uh, in the first attempt, and considering that you have all the knowledge that was required to pass this exam, this will help you out to clear your P7 paper, which is the AAA paper, in the first attempt as well. So you should study this paper with the intentions that you have to pass this exam in the first attempt. You will be getting the knowledge that will be helpful in your professional career, going for the interviews, going for the test, and similarly, while working somewhere, you will have the good knowledge from this subject. And the third thing is that if you do this paper well, then it will help you out to pass your AAA exam, which is one of the optional paper you will be having if you choose to have that. Then you will be able to pass that paper in the first attempt. So these are the few things you need to know regarding this very, very important paper, which is the audit and assurance. Now, we know that this paper is the computer-based exam. We also call it computer-based testing, CBT. So basically, it's computer-based. Almost all of the world is now having the computer-based exam. So this is going to be computer-based. If you are from a part of the world where you still have the manual exams, then apologies for that. But as far as my information is concerned, almost everywhere we are having the computer-based exams. But if you have still manual exams over there, then it's fine. There's no problem. Manual means the paper-based, but usually it is going to be the computer-based exam. So first of all, you need to understand the exam pattern. First of all, you need to understand the exam pattern. Okay, so exam pattern is that we have two sections. We have section A, and then we have section B. So this paper is different from other skills exam, because in other papers, for example, you have in PM and in TX, you have 60 marks of the objective tests or questions or objective test case questions. So you have 60 marks over there. Similarly in the financial management paper. But over here, you have the different marking scheme. Here, the objective case-based questions. So objective case-based questions is only of 30 marks. So only 30 marks for the objective case-based question. So basically you have three questions, three case-based question, and at the rate of 10 marks each. So that makes 30. And that means within that, there will be 5 objective test questions. So within each question, there's 5 objective test questions, So this constitutes 30 marks. So in the section A, you have the case-based questions, and then three 10 marks case-based question, and each will be having the 5 objective test questions. Okay, then moving further to the section B. In the section B, we have 3 questions. So you can say these are the constructed response questions. Constructed response questions. So basically a case study with multiple requirements, constructed response questions. So we have one question of 30 marks and then other 2 of 20 marks. So there are 3 questions over here. So that makes total 100 marks. So 30 in the objective test case questions. And in the section B, you have the long questions, whatever you call it, long question, case study questions, CR question, or the constructed response questions. And then we have the first question of 30 marks, again, having multiple parts. Then question number 2, again, of 20 marks, having multiple parts. And then again, having question number 3, again of 20 marks, having the multiple parts. So that means examiner has the complete opportunity to test your whole syllabus in one paper. Like, for example, if they want to test all the topics, so they can test it, because here you can see they have 3 questions of 10 marks each. So for example, if they're giving from 3 different topics, they can cover 3 topics over here. And then we have 3 long questions having multiple requirements. So they again have the opportunity that they can test every topic in these 3 questions as well. So that means you have no choice. You have to do all the topics. You will not be leaving any topic. You have to do all the topics. So when I say all the topics, let's discuss what are actually those topics. So the topics or the areas in your F8 exam, let me just write what are those areas. So this is my sequence. Remember, this is my sequence of doing the things. Again, my study material, my class slides, my notes are all in this sequence, and even my lectures will be in this sequence. For example, if you see on the web portal or my live classes, which are, which run alongside the recorded course, works in the same sequence. So the question, the chapter number 1 is introduction to the audit, because right now we are doing introduction to the paper. And first of all, you see the introduction to the paper in your web portal. But because if you have taken the live class, then you can simply skip it, because each and everything I've explained it over here. But let's assume you want to watch it again, you can surely watch over there. So the first chapter is actually the introduction to the audit. Now, in this chapter, we are going to study what is audit, what is assurance, because obviously there's a difference between the audit and assurance. Who can be the auditor? What are the rights and duties of the auditor? What audit is actually all about? What we'll be doing in the audit? What is assurance? What are types of assurances? So all these things will be discussed in the chapter number 1, which is known as the introduction to the audit. Now, when it comes to the exam point of view, the question number 1 is usually relevant to the knowledge-based question. For example, here we have 3 questions. There will be multiple requirements, A, B, C, D, for example. In any of the requirement, examiner can ask you some knowledge-based or theoretical, straightforward question. For example, explain the difference between the reasonable assurance and limited assurance. Now, this is something from chapter number 1. So usually we are not going to get any case study from the chapter number 1, because this is simply the theory. Although the whole F8 is all about the theory, but this chapter number 1 is simply the straightforward definitions regarding the audit and assurance, and simply the things like that. Even I do not expect any objective test case question from it. Just you need to know the definitions, and yes, examiner can give you some part as a knowledge-based element where you can get the easy marks and the free marks. So this is the introduction to the audit. The chapter number 2 we'll be doing is the ethics. The ethics. Now, ethics is not the one which you have studied in your, for example, ACCA first exam, which was business and technology. And if you have done it before, that was known as the accountant and business. In that, the ethics was the ethical approaches. For example, the relativist, the absolutist, the pragmatic approach, and similarly, the utilitarianism, egoism. Here we do not have those things. Here the ethics is relevant to the auditor. So for example, when you're doing the audit, you are a professional person. There are some key attributes that should be present in a professional person. What are those? For example, the professional behavior, the integrity, the competence and due care. Although you have studied this part in the BT exam, but here it is purely relevant to the auditor. There we were discussing things with the directors and the management perspective as well. Here, this ethics is purely relevant to the auditor. So the integrity of the auditor, the objectivity of the auditor. And similarly, when you're doing the audit, so there may be some ethical threats that you can face during the engagement. For example, the self-interest threat, for example, the self-review threat. Now there are situations which leads to the self-interest threat. For example, you have a major client and and you do not want to lose them. So you're basically doing everything in their favor so that they keep uh, 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 they keep they stay motivated, and you kept them satisfied just to you make sure that you will be gaining the audit engagement every time. So this is the self-interest, right? And similarly, for example, if you have prepared the financial statement yourself and you're auditing them, then this creates the self-review threat. Or for example, if you're representing the client somewhere, for example, in front of the potential investors, or for example, in front of the banks, that creates advocacy threats. So in this chapter, we will be studying all those situations. For example, taking the loans from the client, representing them in front of the courts, representing them in front of the banks. So all those situations leads to the ethical threats. So ethics is all about the ethical threats. You need to study the ethical threats over here. What are those ethical threats and what are the situations that leads to those ethical threats? And then obviously the auditor needs to prevent themselves from these threats through the safeguards. So with every ethical threat, we are going to study the safeguards. So this is the second thing where we are going to do. And now when it comes to the exam point of view, from this ethics part, you can expect every question. You can have the objective test case question from this part. You can expect this constructed response question because there are a situation where the examiner has given that as a part, for example, of the question number 1 of 30 marks, or for example, a part of the question number 2 of 20 marks. So we can have the constructed response question. And even the third element, which is the knowledge-based element, the straightforward question. For example, if they ask you to define the 5 fundamental principles of ethics. So the knowledge-based part as well can be tested. So this ethics can be tested in every possible way: objective test case question, CR question, and the knowledge-based question. Okay, now coming towards the third thing, which is the corporate governance. Now, again, this is something which you have studied in your BT exam. And if you have not studied or you don't remember, then there's no need to be worried, because we do not take anything for granted that you have already this knowledge. And I'll be just, not explaining those things properly. No, this is not the case. When we are doing any chapter, I'll explain it from the scratch, and I'll not be assuming any knowledge that you will be having. So the corporate governance is about, executive directors, non-executive directors, and then we have the board, and then the structure of the board, and then the board committees. So this is all about corporate governance, the same as you have studied in the BT exam, but the exam is different. In the exam, again, you can have the objective test case questions from it, just like in the recent attempt, we have this in the exam, and the constructed response question. Now, what type of this question it is? Just like the ethics. In the ethics, you will be having a case study, and the examiner asks you to identify and explain the ethical threats and provide the safeguards. In the corporate governance question, they will be giving you a company which is not complying with the corporate governance guidelines, the principles, and the examiner asks you to identify the deficiencies within their corporate governance compliance, what they are not complying, and what is the impact of that, and then provide them the recommendation how they can comply. So in the recommendation, you need to just tell them what the corporate governance says about a particular thing. For example, The corporate governance says the CEO and the chairman should be two separate persons. So for example, if in a question, a single person is having both roles, then obviously we'll be telling this is not according to the corporate governance, that one person will be too powerful, having too much power in their hand, which they can exploit. So this is the impact of that. And the recommendation is that that person should step down from one of the role and should continue the other. And then for the other role, they should look for someone separately. So this is the recommendation. So again, a very interesting question. And then again, you can have the knowledge-based element from this as well. So the knowledge-based element. So this is the corporate governance. Okay, now the fourth chapter is the internal audit. Now, internal audit is again a very interesting chapter. In this chapter, you're going to study what is the difference between internal and external audit. Okay, what are the activities that that are being performed within the internal audit function, and what is the connection between internal audit and external audit. And the other thing is the outsourcing of the internal audit, whether it is advantageous or there are disadvantages attached with it. So again, you can have objective tests, case questions from it, and the knowledge-based element. I do not expect a full-fledged CR question from this. So again, objective test, case question, and the knowledge-based element. So far we have discussed the 4 chapters. Now coming towards the fifth one. The fifth one is, now here the real audit starts. So this is the first stage of the audit cycle, which I name as the planning and risk assessment. So planning is the first stage of the audit. And what we are doing at the planning stage is mainly the risk assessment. So this is the planning and risk assessment stage. You always have the question from this section, and I don't remember any attempt where the examiner has missed it. They are always going to test this, this area, which is from the risk assessment. So what sort of question we will be having? That we can have objective test case question, but obviously examiner do not give the objective test case question from the planning section usually, because they already test it in the CR question. But sometimes, you know, you can get 2 questions even in the CR question or the objective test case question. Not full, even sometime that can be, you know, a part of it. Mainly, you will be getting the constructive response question from this area, which is basically regarding explain the audit risk within the question, and then you need to give them the responses. But I'm going to tell you one thing over here, which is very, very important, that this area requires the accounting knowledge. Now, why is that? Although the complete audit paper requires the audit knowledge, because you're auditing the financial statements. So if you are the auditor and you are auditing the financial statement, first of all, you should know how to prepare the financial statement, because if you're not aware of it, then you cannot find out the mistakes or the misstatements within those financial statements prepared by the management. So the accounting knowledge is very, very important over here. But relevant particularly to this section, you need to have accounting knowledge. When I say accounting knowledge, what sort of knowledge you will be having? You should know, okay, what is inventory? Inventory should be recorded at lower of cost or NRV. You should know IS 16 thing. For example, you should know the depreciation. This is an accounting estimate. Similarly, the revaluation, when it is done, the gain or loss goes to other comprehensive income. Depreciation is charged on revalued amount and remaining useful life. Similarly, regarding to IS 38, you should know what is, for example, goodwill. What is actually the impairment? In the IS 36, you should know what is actually the impairment. For example, the examiner asks you, okay, there are some surplus assets which the company is not yet using. Now, this is the information given to you. Now, what is the connection of this information with the accounting knowledge? Now, we know from IS 36 that if the assets are not in use, they're idle, this is an indicator of the impairment. Now, the management should conduct the impairment review. If they're not conducting the impairment review, then the assets are overstated. Similarly, other things, for example, you should know the bank reconciliation. What we do in the bank reconciliation, the cash book reconciles with the bank statement. So similarly, you should know what is accruals and prepayments. So you should have the accounting knowledge. You should know regarding what is the entry of the share issuance. When the company issues the share, it should be recorded as share capital and the share premium. There should be a split. Now, why I am saying that you need the accounting knowledge? Because we are studying the audit risk areas, that the management has prepared the financial statements. What is the risk over there? What areas they cannot perform the accounting treatment correctly? For example, they have done the revaluation. Now, after revaluation, depreciation should be recorded on revalued amount. So basically, you will be writing the risk that the management has done the revaluation. Depreciation should be recorded on revalued amount. There's a risk that depreciation may be recorded on previous carrying amount rather than the revalued amounts. So we are not sure whether they have done this, just a risk. Just like, when an officer is doing the investigation, for example, of a murder case. So first of all, they identify the suspects, those who may be involved in that murder. So they just start investigating people, uh, uh, keeping this thing in their mind. Okay, this person can do this person can do this, and they just start investigating. So just like that, we are here identifying the areas which within the financial statement can be misstated. And then we will be checking them actually, which is the auditor's response. So this is a very interesting area, but remember, this requires the accounting knowledge. Without accounting knowledge, you won't be able to perform in this section. So this is just the F3 or the financial accounting paper you should remember. That's it. And there can be a knowledge-based question from this section as well. For example, materiality, performance materiality, analytical procedures, and there are some important straightforward questions which can be tested. Okay, then we have the sixth chapter, which is again very, very important and is always tested. There's not even a single attempt where the examiner has missed it. Every time it is going to be tested. That is known as the internal controls. Internal controls, and within this internal controls, we have internal control systems. Internal control systems. For example, the sales system, the purchase system, the payroll system. And in the exam, the examiner asks you mainly regarding the deficiencies within the system. They are going to give you a system. It can be a generic system, a sales system, or purchase system. So they ask you to identify deficiencies and then define the impact of those deficiencies on the client business. And then we provide the recommendation. And sometimes we have the test of control things, test of controls. That means how, being an auditor, you are going to test their controls, whether they are, strong or weak, whether they are effective. So that audit procedure is known as the test of control. Again, something very important. Then sometime examiner can ask you to identify the key controls or the strengths within the system, and then provide recommendation how it can be improved further. But usually we have the deficiencies part, but sometimes they ask this key control or strength section as well. Again, a very, very important area of the exam. Then moving further, we have another important area, which is known as the audit evidence and substantive procedures. The audit evidence and the substantive procedures. Now, again, a very, very important section of the exam. So here you will be talking about the financial statement figures and amounts. For example, the sales figure, the receivable figure, the inventory figure, the property, plant, and equipment figure. So here you will be having the substantive procedures. So usually it comes as a CR question. Okay, just I forgot to mention you that it can be again the same objective test case question, CR, and knowledge based. And again, usually from the audit evidence and the substantive, we have the CR question, a case study, where you are supposed to write the audit procedure, but relevant to the case study, and the objective test case questions. Usually the objective test case question of this section is challenging. It is not easy. So basically they ask you, for example, you are auditing the property, plant, and equipment. Which audit procedure is the most relevant procedure? Now there will be 4 procedures, all of them are correct, and they're asking you most relevant. Sometimes they ask you the least relevant procedure. So there it is very, challenging to identify the right option. So the CR question, the CR question, yes, is easier, as my notes covers all the aspects of it. You can just learn it and you can apply in an exam question. Now, for the objective test case question, you need to have the proper understanding of those areas. If that is not the case, then you will be facing, the difficulty over there. Okay, so moving further in the section number 8, we have the review stage. Again, that is something important. This includes, for example, the subsequent events. This includes the going concern. And basically it's the review stage of the audit. Again, you can have the objective tests, case questions, and the CR question, as it is tested many times in the exam. And sometimes, the knowledge-based element as well, but not usually the case. Then we have the 9th chapter, which is the report, the audit report. What types of audit reports are there? And then usually the CR question from this. And they usually attach this substantive section with this section. So these 2 areas, they attach them. And you can have the objective test case question as well, and the knowledge-based element. Last chapter is the audit sampling. Again, it's a theoretical chapter. You can do that in any sequence, but I just keep it at the end for no reason. So audit sampling and the CATS, computer-assisted audit techniques, using the computer softwares to perform the audit. And this is usually the knowledge-based element. So this is the course, and these are the topics and the areas. Very, very interesting paper. This will improve your knowledge, improve your expertise. This will make you smart, intelligent. This will bring skepticism in your personality. Very, very interesting paper. Learning, full of learning, full of learning. Okay, now let's talk about the last thing we need to know in the orientation is the study resources. So if you're taking my course, what study resources you will be needing? So first of all, we have the class slides that works as my notes as well. So sometimes, I need to open it in the class to show you something. Otherwise, just like I'm doing right now, I write the chapters and make notes for you guys, which is eventually given to you after the class. So class slides and the notes. And the second thing is the short notes, which is for the theoretical areas that you need to learn. The third thing is the exam kit, and I use the Kaplan kit. So you should have the latest Kaplan kit. If you want to read any book, we don't read the book in the class because that is not professional. You have to read it yourself. Then again, you can take the Kaplan. The last thing is the past papers and the question bank. Sometimes, there are areas you do not find much questions in the exam kit. Let me give an example. For example, ethics, very few questions. Corporate governance, a single question, not much question available in the exam kit. So there are areas the exam kit does not entertain much. In those scenarios, I provide you the past papers and the questions from my question bank that help you to prepare properly all the areas of the audit paper. So first of all, we discussed the exam pattern, and then we discussed the topics, and we related that to the exam question, how they will be coming up in the exam. I've already explained to you what each area is going to teach you. What are the learning objectives in those areas? What type of question you will be having from there? And then we have the study resources, which is the last thing we have discussed over here. So if there is any question, you can just write in the chat box, or you can just write the message in the WhatsApp as well. You can WhatsApp with those questions. So join the course if you want to appear in the December 22 exam attempt. And if you want to pass this paper, let me just give you a tip. So you can say the last thing of the today's lecture. If you want to pass this exam in the first attempt, so the first thing first is you should have the accounting knowledge. Without accounting knowledge, you won't be able to do two main areas. The first area is the planning and risk assessment, the risk questions. Without accounting knowledge, you won't be able to do that. And the second section is the substantive procedures. If you are not having the accounting knowledge, then you will struggle in these two areas, which is a significant portion of the exam. So you can say a 40% of the paper. The second thing is the common sense. Remember that you need to be skeptical. You need to have the analytical skills, and don't just, cram all the topics. You need to learn few things by heart, but not everything in this exam. You need to have the common sense, analytical skills, analytical ability to identify the odds in the paper. The third thing is the English. Again, you should have a proper English to first of all understand the exam question and then writing those things in the exam. This is the third thing. The fourth thing is the typing speed, because this is a theoretical exam and obviously you need to write in the computer. So make sure you're practicing as much as you can to boost your typing speed. So these are the four things that you need to have in order to pass this exam. No accounting knowledge means you're missing the significant area. Common sense is applied in the whole of this exam. And then the English, because you need to write in English. Sometimes the students, when they explain me in their local language, they're saying it fine, but what they have written is completely wrong. So if examiner is going to pass you based on what you have written in the exam, not what you're having in your mind. The fourth thing is the typing speed. If you are not able to cover the exam, complete exam, if you're not able to attempt the full paper, remember, you won't be able to pass this exam. So this is all about my introductory lecture, which is also called as orientation. Now, just go to the web portal if you have enrolled and start taking lectures. And if you have enrolled for the live classes as well, then my live classes will cover the additional practice and the problems and concerns of yours which you have faced during the recorded lectures. So you can discuss those things over here in the live lectures. So this is all about today's lecture.